Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider, brought to you, just for a change, by Vanishing Inc. My guest today is a very busy magician. He's a very funny comedian. He combines the two and puts on lots of killer shows. He's just released a book giving a stage-by-stage guide from moving to doing close-up magic for your friends or shows to putting on a full stage or parlour performance. It's the incredible John Graham. John, how are you this afternoon?
I'm great, Damien. How are you?
I am delicious, thanks for asking. It's a short show, there's no time for pleasantries. What's your magic origin story? You've got 36 seconds.
Well, when I was a kid, I was already drawn to magic and always kind of fascinated by magic, but I think most kids are. And what really pushed me over the edge was when I was about 11 years old and with a friend of mine downtown, and he said, "Do you want to go to the magic shop?" And I thought, well, of course I want to go to the magic shop. You better not be kidding about this magic shop. And we went in, and there really was a magic shop, and it's become an obsession, and it has been ever since.
Perfect. There are going to be some of our listeners who are unfamiliar with your work. You do not flood the magic industry with releases. Can you explain a bit about what your livelihood is with magic? What kind of shows are you doing?
Well, it really is just that, doing show after show. So I do a lot of everything. I mean, I do close-up magic, walk-around magic, and then I do some formal close-up shows, which is a better situation because you kind of have the audience captive and you're not interrupting people and approaching different groups. But I do it both ways. And then I do parlor and stage shows, which is the main thing that I do. So I might one night be in front of 20 or 30 people, and then the next night, like last night, for instance, there was about, I would say, 300 people or so in the audience. And a lot of times I'm doing the same material, but just making it play to a bigger audience and incorporating things like music and making the show feel like a real show. So I would say, to describe it, a one-man show, comedy, but I don't think of myself as a comedy magician, and also, strong magic.
Sure, sure. As a performer, one thing I couldn't come to Magi Fest this year, but one of the things I kept hearing from everybody is about how engaging and charming a performer you are. Do you think those skills are something that you can learn? And if so, how?
That's a good. Are you sure they were talking about me, first of all?
Yeah, I am sure. I double checked, John.
It was me? All right, well, I'm honored. So I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. Is it something you can learn? I think so. I think maybe when you get comfortable enough with your material, when you do it hundreds and thousands of times, when you literally aren't thinking about the trick anymore. I mean, you're getting through it and you're performing it, but you really can focus on everything else. And not just focus on everything else, but you can relax to the point where you can enjoy the show. And when you get to that point and you can enjoy it, you become very aware of all of your movements, of comments that you make, of comments that the audience makes. So as long as it's your true personality, I think it can be done because you're finally allowing your true personality to come out. When you're too wrapped up in the trick and you're too worried about everything that could happen and the way you have to do everything, like when you're doing a new trick, for instance, you might be not really in tune with the audience. And someone might say something and it might not necessarily throw you off, but you're not really in the moment enough to react to it. So I think those things can be developed as long as it's who you really are that you are trying to bring out.
Yeah, that makes sense. You said about thousands of performances, and flight time's something that you mention in the book. There are going to be listeners to this that would love to get the flight time but don't really know how to start. How would somebody less experienced go about getting those thousands of performances under their belt, do you think?
It's I would say, be willing to do any kind of show anywhere for any kind of pay. And the example that I give is, if you're working in a restaurant, maybe somebody comes in and they're having an event in the banquet room, and maybe they'd be happy for you to do a little magic for all of their guests. And you can suggest, why don't we do a little show, 10, 15-minute show, just so you can try out your routines, or at least one or two of them. in front of a bigger audience. And don't look at it and don't say, well, this isn't the situation that I plan to be in. And don't say, well, I don't have the music that I plan to use. Do it and you'll learn so much from that one performance. And then you can go to places where they have improv groups or comedians or bands and offer to perform maybe as an opening act or in between sets. Anywhere where people go to watch some kind of show, you might be able to become part of that show. Maybe you're the person who is going to act as an MC to introduce the main thing of the evening. And then you can offer to perform something either in the beginning or, in between acts or something like that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there if you're willing to take them and not look down on them. Because the more you do those situations that you kind of don't want to be in, the more bulletproof you're going to make all of your material.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. We've kind of dived straight into talking about the book without explaining what the book is. It's just come out today, which is Friday, the 10th of December. This podcast will be out on Monday. And the book just was released 20 minutes ago, which is very exciting. It's called Stage by Stage. Tell us about the book.
It is exciting and an honor to be working with Vanishing Inc. It's a book that I worked on for about 5 or 6 years, writing, rewriting, going back and forth, and literally begins right from where you are, about talking about close-up magic and then doing close-up magic for more people, which is a situation people often find themselves in when you are a close-up magician, but maybe you have multiple crowds gathering around you when you're doing walk-around magic at an event. Or maybe you are in a restaurant and 30 people come in as part of a wedding party, and now you have to kind of entertain them. So you already know which of your routines you can do that will play to a bigger size audience. And then going from there, from close-up to parlor, to platform, to stage, and learning about what kind of tricks you can do on stage, and then routining those tricks together into a show. Whether it's because your opening trick kind of relates to your last trick, and now your whole show has a feeling of cohesiveness to it. And then adding in things like comedy and music and making your whole show really feel like a show rather than a bunch of tricks. You never really want your show to feel like, okay, here's a trick. Okay, that one's done. Okay, here's another trick. Okay, that one's done. Okay, here's another trick. So how do you make those transitions? And how do you not make the show drag by calling people up every time, every trick? Let's call someone else up. Okay, you can go back. All right, let's call someone else up. So it addresses all of those issues with routines for not only my repertoire, but my actual working act. My full show is in the book. And then other material from other shows is in the book as well. So I held nothing back. It's all there. If anybody's interested, as I said, nothing's been held back. So.
You've not really released much before this, aside from a couple of your tricks, like the newspaper tear. Why have you decided now is the right time to share your work?
It sort of just felt like it was time. If you asked me, let's say 15 years ago, when I had my act, which is the same act that it is now, hopefully it's been refined and it's gotten better little by little, but pretty much the material's been the same. If you were to say to me 15 years ago as a magician, what tricks do you do in your show? I would have said, well, it's always different. It depends on the audience. It depends on the situation. And really, it didn't depend. And it isn't always different. It's always the same. But I've been very guarded with my material. Even material that's not my material. One of the tricks that I love to do is Daryl's rope routine, for instance. I added hardly anything to that routine. But I still wouldn't want to tell another magician, this is a trick that I do. Or Bob Cassidy's fourth dimensional telepathy. Love the routine. A lot of working magicians know this is a powerful routine. But I wouldn't want people to know because I wanted to do it. And I wanted to keep it to myself as much as I could. So when I decided that I had something to offer, I didn't want to hold back in such a way. I didn't want to write the book and try to explain something while trying to hold back at the same time. And we've seen a lot come out in magic where the magician really does give away his working routines, his or her working routines, and the sky doesn't tumble down around them. There aren't thousands of magicians copying the person exactly. So I guess I just felt like it was time, and that I had something to offer. Also, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have had as much to offer as I feel like I do now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. And for me, Deep Astonishment by Paul Harris, I'm telling the listeners, you obviously know who it's by, is one of the strongest things you can do with a deck of cards. I've loved it since it was released. You explain your take on it in the book with Name Dropper. Can you tell us a bit about your version, what you've changed, and why?
Well, I'm smiling because I love this trick. Love this routine. I just can't say enough good things about it. Paul Harris came out with it. It was called the Anything Deck when his 3-volume set of books came out, The Art of Astonishment. And so I read it in there and learned it, and it was great. And I used it, but then I stopped using it. It just wasn't quite right after a while. But what an ingenious effect and method. Both are great. And so then Deep Astonishment came out. And I started working with that a little bit. And I really didn't love the method, but I loved some of the changes that they made. So I decided, all right, I'm going to make some changes on my own. I'm going to try to get rid of everything that I don't like, and I'm going to try to keep what I do like. And that's not so easy because the things that I don't like were not just for show, they were part of the method. I mean, there were magnets involved, and there was a gimmicked wallet, and there were extra cards in with the prediction, with the name at the end. There were all these extra cards, and I didn't like any of that. So I just sat there, day after day working on it, thinking there has to be a way to do all this. And I wasn't sure, but I just kind of insisted to myself, there has to be a way. So not so much that I'm coming up with a way, but that I'm discovering a way and I'm uncovering the way that already exists, but I just don't know what it was. So that's the approach that I took with it, and finally put together something that I was very, very happy with and started performing it and getting great reactions with it. Then I was performing it for a group one night, and I realized if I collect the cards and put everything away in a certain way, I can be instantly reset. So that was very appealing. Then the trick became better to me. And then I showed it to Paul Harris. And at one point I was doing a palming cards off of the prediction packet. And I thought, he's going to love this. And I showed it to him. And he said, why are you palming those cards? And I said, well, because it makes the prediction packet cleaner at the end. You get rid of all those extra cards. He said, yes, but why are you palming those cards? I said, well, it also, for the reset, now you can be instantly reset just by adding them again. And he said, but why are you palming those cards? So then I realized, I don't think Paul likes palming very much. And we changed the subject. So I thought, I don't know what he's talking about. But then I thought, he's right, though. There is something better than palming the cards. So I kept thinking about it, and I still remember the day that it hit me. And I was just kind of sitting there, and the thought occurred to me that I could get rid of the palm that I was using. And it seems like a minor thing. But again, the palm was part of the method, so it was not so easy to eliminate. And I just knew right away, before I even went into the other room and got the cards, I knew this was going to work. And so it does work. And it's still Paul's trick. It's, the version in the book, just my handling. It's Paul's effect. It's even Paul's method, but the handling is mine. And I love the effect. Probably the strongest thing that I do. When you deal those cards out at the end, and because you've done other versions of it, when you deal the cards out and the person sees the name of the person that they're thinking of, it's unbeatable as far as impact goes. And sometimes I'll be doing that trick for a group of people, and all of a sudden I find myself doing it for a guy, and I realize, I should have done this with a woman. Her reaction would have been better. And I've had men who look like, they cannot be broken. They kind of have this hard exterior, break down when they see the trick. I've had people cry, but they don't cry in a negative way. They cry because it's a special person to them, and they want to give you a hug later. And sometimes they say, can I keep the cards? And of course, yes, keep the cards. It's very special. The impact is so great, and it's just such a great trick to do. So the version in the book is that you can repeat it. It's instantly repeatable. Just by putting everything away, you're ready to repeat it with a different name, of course, and a different card for somebody to select. And also, it's in your case, So it's always ready to go. So I can go to my case right now, grab the cards, and do the trick for you. I don't need to have something in this pocket, something in that pocket. It's just always ready to go. And it's not hard to do. That's the other great thing. So very happy with it, but really happy with, what Paul Harris has given us.
That should sell the book on its own, really. What are some of the common mistakes you see people make when transitioning from close-up to stage or parlour work?
Well, I don't know if I could call them mistakes because it might work for them and it might not be a mistake. You can take everything that I say in the book and you can do the exact opposite and you can be a success. You can be a hit. There are no rules. That is the one rule that I believe in,
Sure.
that there are no rules.
In your opinion.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not trying to be, grandiose or pedantic about anything, but I think some of the issues that we run into.
I'm not asking you to call people out.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So then I can relax. Well, I wanted to name names, but okay, you're saying not to. But things that we run into when you're trying to put together a stage show is you're kind of gathering material and you're going through a lot of material thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And everything becomes a card trick or mentalism because there's just so many card tricks and so much mentalism. And mentalism is something that can pack small and play big, so you're kind of drawn to it without realizing that mentalism can also be hard to do. And also, if you're a magician and you're doing all this mentalism, you're going to kind of confuse the audience who thought they were coming to see a magician. So, I talk about ways to overcome that. The biggest issue that I think there is when you're trying to do a stage show is finding the flow, making your routines flow and making your show flow so that you're not stumbling, you're not hesitating, you're not pausing in between tricks. When someone comes up on stage, it's not a brief pause in the action until we can finally get back to the magic. When you're going through the procedure of your trick, it's not boring for 5 or 10 minutes until you finally get to the climax of the trick. So making the show flow, I would say that would be the biggest issue that I've had, finding ways to do that. I don't know if that answers the question. I hope it does. If
it
not,
does. It does.
Okay.
No, it answers it perfectly. You talk in the book about adapting a close-up trick to work on stage. Do you think every trick has that potential to be adapted to work on a platform, or are there some that clearly people should ditch and not even try to transform?
Good question. I think no, not every trick. Steve Martin, joked that he was going to close. He was doing arenas and stadiums, and he said his closing trick, he's going to change the date on a dime. So that is not a trick that would work. So some tricks will work on stage and some tricks won't. The main thing is getting the props off of the table, off of a horizontal plane on the table, and bringing them up to a vertical plane at chest height where people can see them. And not every trick you can do that with. Also, tricks that you can do that with might still not be good. One of the best close-up tricks is Anniversary Waltz. And yes, you kind of can do that for a bigger group, and they kind of can see it, but they can't feel it. And if you've ever done that trick, people want to touch that card and really feel that this is a single card. So for that reason, a trick like that might not be great for going from close-up to stage. But a trick that is great is any kind of ring on string routine, because it all kind of plays up here rather than down there. And a ring is a shiny object. And the other advantage of doing something that's basically a close-up trick, but doing it on stage, is that you have the effect of drawing people in. So if you do that in the beginning of your show, a trick that they kind of have to work to see and to appreciate, you're going to draw them in a little bit. Now, you don't want to do a whole show like that because you don't want people to tune out and say, I can't see what he's doing, never mind. But in the beginning, a little bit of it is okay. So I think, not every close-up trick will work on stage, but as you try to make the transition, you'll learn lessons about each and you'll improve as a close-up magician and as a stage magician.
Is there a clear process for adapting a routine to play for a larger audience?
Not necessarily A, B, C kind of formula. I don't think there necessarily is. Um, not really, not in a structured format, but you kind of learn what tricks can play bigger. When you do a trick like Bill and Lemon on stage, whether it's with a torrent corner or a serial number or a signature, the audience, most of the audience can't really see the person's signature. They can't see that the torn corner really fits in, and they can't see the serial number on the bill either. But the trick can play to a big audience because of the people on stage transmitting their reaction to the rest of the audience and acting as verification that it is what it is. So I don't know if I'm getting away from your actual question, but I don't think there is a clear step-by-step process, as you call it. I call it a
Fair,
process.
fair. In the book, you write about the importance of connecting with your audience. Can you talk a bit about that? How can someone learn to connect with their audience or improve it? How can they do that?
Well, maybe in between the tricks. You know, as you're walking around the audience looking to get a person or to borrow a bill or something, you ask people, hey, where are you guys from? Oh, yeah? And what do you do for a living? Little things like that. People want to know that kind of about their fellow audience members. They like it when they find these things out about people. So you can find out things like that and ask questions like that in between your tricks. So your whole show has this sort of texture rather than just saying, hey, look at me and look at my tricks. And making jokes or comments that really connect with people. If you comment on a current event, and you have to be careful because you don't want to be preaching and you don't want to be talking about politics in your show. It's okay to be real and to be genuine, but we also have to help people to escape from these things. So I like to, if you know your material so well, you can connect with the audience because you're not worried about how your tricks work. You're more concerned with connecting with them. So I would say, yeah, in between the tricks and by being authentic. The audience can tell when someone is being sincere. They can just tell. You don't have to tell them. And if you tell them, it might be the opposite anyway. You might not be sincere. But they can tell when someone is genuine. So you can open up your heart a little bit, share a little bit, tell them a little bit about yourself. And that's a great way to connect with people. How do we connect with people in real life?
Yeah.
You know, we don't connect with them by lecturing to them. You know, we connect when they open up and when we open up.
Fair. Very good point. Very good point. Now, when you're on stage, obviously, you need to leave room in your script for the person that hasn't got a script, the spectator who's kindly the unpaid part of your act. But what do you think, I think to me it seems that quite a lot of close-up magicians may scoff at scripts and say, oh, I'd just like to jazz it, and this approach is kind of sometimes okay for close-up, but is it ever okay for stage? Or are you a strict script stickler?
Wow. Very impressive alliteration. No, I'm not strict about it, but it can only help. And you don't have to, you can begin the routine, you can try it out a few times even before you write a script, but you're ultimately going to come back to a script, whether you begin with it or end with it. The advantage of beginning with it is that you can kind of go through it and you'll see, wow, I'm saying the same thing 3 times, but in 3 different ways. I could just cut that. And if you really get relentless about it, your whole show becomes tighter and better. So even the close-up magician who said, I learned this trick, I do it, and now I do it in my close-up performance all the time, and maybe you've done it 5,000 times. And maybe what you say is practically the same every time, even though you never wrote out a script. You can still go back to it and make changes. I think it's advantageous to do it when you're working on your stage show, because you'll see all those, oh, I should say this later. I should say this part first. Let me intrigue the audience by saying something right in the beginning to hook them, rather than starting a trick by saying, pick a card.
Yeah.
You know, Darwin Ortiz writes about this in Strong Magic, about the intriguing statement or the intriguing question. So those things are important. So people do it both ways. Some people write out everything, and even when you have a script, yes, you can go off of the script and come back to it, and you don't really feel like you're coming into this memorization thing. It's just what you say because this is the most effective way to put it across.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
want to go if I was doing close-up magic and going from table to table. I wouldn't want the table right next to me to hear me saying exactly what I said over there. So, you can vary it up a little bit, but yeah, I think the script is a smart move.
You mentioned earlier about the proliferation of card magic and mentalism as go-to things, and in the book you mentioned about how you can think about changing a card trick into being a non-card trick. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I found it really interesting.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about. It might not work every time, but for instance, John Lovick in his book Handsome Jack, etc., has a routine based on Martin Lewis's cardiographic, which is a great trick that everybody does with the card rising from the sketch pad. But the way John Lovick does it is it's a picture of the magician coming out of a birthday cake. So just by changing the objects, you take that card trick and you make it into a non-card trick. Just by maybe you can use something other than cards. Maybe you can use postcards. Or maybe instead of doing a cards across, you can do a bills across. Something like that just to change it. Sometimes it's not better. Sometimes the card trick is the best thing. Um, you know, I love Nate Staniforth. He was at Magi Fest and he was great. And he has a book and he has a two card transposition. And towards the end, he talks about how you could do it with blank cards and to not even call them cards, call them name tags or call them note cards, I think he says. And so now you could have somebody sign a blank card over here and somebody else signs a blank card over here, and the two note cards change places. But I just feel like that trick, even though it's a card trick, it's a great card trick. So there's no need to change it. I have a thing in the book with the lasso card trick, which is one of my favorite tricks. And instead of having a card selected, you could have pictures of cows on blank cards again and say, look at all the different cows. You're going to pick one. You're going to assign a branding number to it. And then so when you lasso, instead of just lassoing a regular card, you're talking about roping cattle and you're going to rope the right one. So you've
Right.
changed the card trick into a non-card trick just
There
by
you go.
changing the object. Yeah.
Very smart. If there was just one bit of advice from the book that you could share with the listeners who are wanting to move to putting on their own show, what would it be?
I would say go for it. Don't keep waiting until you're ready. Don't think once I have this, I can finally do my show. I really want that one trick because that would be my closer. Don't make excuses. Just go for it. Don't worry about somebody telling you you're not ready to do it. I am a professional magician, and I've heard the thing about if you do a show when you're not ready, you're taking something away from the professional magician who might need that show to feed his family. Yes, but what if you're someone who wants to do a show? You're not going to know everything before you do it. You're going to learn it by doing it. So I'm not saying to not practice. Obviously, practice, read, research, think, study, rehearse, but don't let it stop you from going for it because the questions are not going to answer themselves. The show is not going to create itself. And the self-doubt that you might have is not going to go away by itself. So you start doing some shows and you'll answer your questions much more quickly than when you're just home practicing in your room. You have to do both, but don't let one stop you from doing the other.
Excellent advice. Um, who are some of the finest stage parlour magicians that you wished you could have seen work but missed out on?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, if you want to say stage, obviously Robert Houdin would have been, I mean, I just couldn't imagine watching his show. It would have been great. I love Tarbell. I love the Tarbell course. So I would have loved to have seen Tarbell. I don't know. I have a general feel for what he must have been like as a performer, but I would have loved to have seen him anyway. Even though I don't think magicians think of him as like the legendary performer Tarbell. He was a legendary teacher, but I would just love to see what he was like because of the way he wrote. So he would have been great just to see and to experience. And I'm sure so many others. I'm afraid to start naming them
No,
because it's going to keep going and going. But all the greats throughout history. Um,
those two are a very good start. We are just about out of time,
Sure.
John. But we always end the show with 4 quick-fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes, and I might be able to answer them without you asking them
Okay,
because I'm a fan of your podcast.
go for it.
All right, so
I'll just sit
pepperoni,
back. Okay, pepperoni.
Harry Mack, About Time, and whichever one is the 100 little one.
That, sir, is the finest end to this podcast that there has ever been. It's made me laugh hugely. Thank you. John Graham,
We
your
could have
book,
used more time
Stage
during
by...
the origin story if we knew we were going to save all that time.
Your book, Stage by Stage, is available at vanishinginkmagic.com right now. In fact, because it's Monday that this is going to go out, we're going to sell loads of copies over the weekend. So if you're listening to this now on Monday, run along, type it into your search engine and buy it now. You will not be disappointed. John Graham, thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Damien. I had a great time.
Boom.